It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Yes! Yes! And thank God. That's how I respond to game 3 of this 3-game series against the Blue Jays. Yes, yes, and thank God, because the New York Mets were 3 outs away. And forget about the embarrassment of being no hit. Forget about that, because it's only one game. You get no hit. What the hell does it really mean? They were 3 outs away from dropping a series to a crappy Toronto Blue Jay team and doing it in a way in which their offense looked dead upon arrival. And then Francisco Lindor happened. We've got a lot to talk about, including the dramatic Game 3 victory against the Toronto Blue Jays, this series as a whole. We'll preview what's coming up over the weekend against the Philadelphia Phillies, and, of course, the state of the National League wildcard race, which continues to have topsy-turvy. I'm excited. I'm depressed. Now I'm excited again. Now I'm depressed. Now I'm pumped up. And obviously, we'll go through the 3 games that the Mets played against the Blue Jays, and we'll check your emails. But let's start right at the end of this series. Let's start in the top of the 9th inning. And I'm not sure how everybody consumed a baseball game that started 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Not exactly an ideal start time. Of course, depending on your work habits. In my case, I'm on the radio during this time. And not exactly ideal, but I'm able to watch as much of the game as humanly possible. And I said this before the game. I apologize for not being able to do Rico's the last couple of days. So it's been kind of an inactive Rico Brogna schedule, but we'll be back at it as hard as we can, especially over the final stretch of 2.5 weeks of this season. But I said this on WFAN going into Game 3 of this series after the Mets won Game 1 and lost Game 2. And it's obvious. So I wasn't splitting an atom by saying it. This finale on Wednesday afternoon with Sean Manaea on the mound was as important of a game as the Mets have played all year. As great as the winning streak had been, as wonderful as it was, as much ground as they made up, you can't lose a series to the Toronto Blue Jays. You can't do that. You can't do it when you've got your basic ace on the mound in Sean Manaea, and you're facing a guy in Bowden Francis who's okay. Now, let's be honest. He's not exactly a world beater, but he's been solid. I don't want to dismiss him completely. But a young pitcher and a guy the Mets should beat. You can't lose this game. If you lose this game, it's a big swing in momentum going into 3 games against a good Philadelphia Phillies team. And what I said on the radio prior to this game was it was time for this offense to wake up, because the offense was pretty limp for the most part in the Cincinnati series, completely limp in the first 2 games of this series, as we'll get into later. And they've got to go out, not just Lindor, whether it's Pete Alonso, whether it's J.D. Martinez, Brandon Nimmo, but mostly Pete Alonso, being who he is and the season that he's had. The Mets have to hit. The Mets have gotten great starting pitching. They've gotten great bullpen work, really up until David Peterson. Now they got to hit. And for 8 innings on a Wednesday afternoon, we had to watch not just this offense be completely shut down by Bowden Francis, but be hitless for 8 innings. They had 2 base runners. I wasn't able to score this game, so I don't have the ability to just look down at my scorecard. I'll be able to do that for Game 1 and Game 2 of this series. I'm just so happy that this is the last game of the baseball season that I can't score. I could score every other game the rest of the season, but this one, a Wednesday afternoon, 3 o'clock, unable to. They had 2 base runners. I think it was a walk and a hit batsman. Pete Alonso got hit by a pitch. That's it. And the good news in all of this, as the offense continued to be limp, was that Sean Manaea, not with his best stuff, not with his best command, walking 4 guys, putting himself in little bits of trouble, Sean Manaea did a hell of a job keeping this game close. Outside of, bases loaded, nobody out, which was a tough little spot he put himself in, but then got the ground out to at least get an out and then eventually work through the inning, not allowing any more runs. Manaea kept him in the game. He threw 109 pitches. I love the way, as much as I could pay attention, I love the way Mendy stuck with him. And then once he issued that 4-pitch walk bottom of the order, you got to make the move. And he makes the move to Reed Garrett, who continues to earn his stripes in terms of being in this circle of trust in the New York Met bullpen. But all the while the offense was doing nothing against Bowden Francis and writing this script of ineptitude, being no hit by him, you have your starting pitching doing what it's been doing for a while right now, which is bailing this team out. Like, I admit, when I had optimism about this team coming into the year, the formula was they're going to score a lot of runs and their pitching will be somewhat competent, more competent than maybe we thought. Well, if you think about the way the Mets have won games over the last couple of weeks, for the most part, you can find your scenarios where they put up crooked numbers. But even in those games where they put up crooked numbers, they seem to happen in bunches. They seem to happen late. They have had a lot of games in which their offense does nothing, and it's bailed out by starting pitching that's pitching well over their head, well over their skis, I think is the phrase. Now, maybe Sean Manaea has figured this whole thing out, and he's not pitching over his skis. Maybe that's who Sean Manaea is. But Sean Manaea kept them in this game while their offense did absolutely nothing. And so credit to him, credit to Reed Garrett, credit to Carlos Mendoza, and then you get to the ninth inning. And as this ninth inning starts, with the Mets trailing 1-0, losing a series to a Blue Jay team, wouldn't be a death sentence for the season. It'd just be a very disappointing loss, especially ahead of an off day and especially ahead of a stretch that's really challenging, taking on a Philly team that, I mean, it feels like it's been 10 years since the Mets played the Phillies. And the reason it feels like that is because it has. The Mets haven't played the Phillies. Think about this for a second. Since London. That was the sequence that turned their season around. London. That was in June. The Mets have gone the entire summer without seeing the Philadelphia Phillies. We've glanced at them from afar. We haven't seen them. So you are staring at a stretch of games that is very difficult and losing a series to the Toronto Blue Jays. And then you have Francisco Lindor. And what I can't believe about that at-bat was he's behind in the count, 0-2. And Francis threw a fastball, I think it was a cutter, that was right down Broadway. And to Lindor's credit, he said it after the game, he was looking to hit a line drive. Well, he hit something more than a line drive. He hit the crap out of that ball. And there have been a lot of meaningful hits over the stretch of this season. A lot of meaningful moments, a lot of big moments. You want to name a few? Go back to the beginning of the season. Pete Alonso's home run at 0-5. In a very similar kind of game, losing 1-0, being no hit by a no-name. In that case, it was the Tigers in their bullpen. And Pete hit a leadoff home run in the bottom of the ninth inning at an empty Citi Field to tie that game up. And then they promptly went on and won that game. They've had a lot of significant hits this year. That swing by Francisco Lindor, that cut by Francisco Lindor, that bomb by Francisco Lindor, that pimp job by Francisco Lindor. And I'm all for the pimp job. That was a hell of a pimp job. That was probably the most important of all of that we've seen this season. For the myriad of reasons I gave. They needed it. And Francisco Lindor delivered. And whether he's the MVP or not, I don't really care very much, especially right now. All I care is that he is bailing this team out because that's what he's been doing. The Mets were staring a series loss and a no-hitter loss to the Toronto Blue Jays. And everything changed. And then Jose Iglesias, I don't want to forget him, getting an infield hit, going to second on the bad throw. Mark Vientos drawing a walk. Brandon Nimmo drawing a walk. And the Mets being set up in a spot with bases loaded, nobody out, where it was going to take a major F-up to not take the lead. And credit to Pete Alonso. Pete takes a lot of crap, and honestly, Pete deserves a lot of the crap that he's been taking recently. He's getting it even from me, a guy that grew his beard out because I wanted him extended. And while it is no time to talk about his extension or his future, all I'll say, and this goes for Pete, it goes for a lot of guys on this team, but it really goes for Pete. You got to hit. We need you. The Mets need you. This lineup needs you. Francisco Lindor needs you. And Pete Alonso may not have hit a grand slam, May not have ripped a double to clear the bases up, but with bases loaded, nobody out, in a tie game, he did something that was very, very important. He left no doubt. He put the ball to deep right field, and it allowed Eddie Alvarez, the pinch runner, to score from third. And that was important, and that was clutch. So while Pete still has a lot more he needs to accomplish over the final 16 games of this season, and he is very, very important to the middle of this order, and I would like to see Pete go on some kind of red-hot streak right now, power-wise. It would really behoove this team, and maybe going to Philadelphia, a hitter's ballpark of the past, will be a place that can help him. That was a very important moment. And they did it again with Starling Marte. Now, the sacrifice fly may not be the sexiest thing in the world, but when you're up 2-1 and you want to get that insurance run in, Starling Marte didn't hit the ball nearly as deep as Pete. He hit it to short right field. I wasn't necessarily sure if Eddie Alvarez was going to score. He was the base runner on the Marte sac fly. On the Alonso sac fly, it was Jose Iglesias, who's got a little bit of speed. But I wasn't sure on the Marte fly ball if Alvarez was going to be able to score. And he did, mainly because the throw was up the first base line. So 3-1, we're all feeling good. We're all feeling comfortable, despite Edwin Diaz almost giving us a heart attack on Monday night. Okay, 3-1 lead. We feel decent. But then you have Francisco Alvarez. And while I won't put kind of the pressure on Alvarez that I'll put on Pete or I'll put on JD Martinez or Brandon Nimmo, guys with more established track records of being offensive players, it'd be nice for Francisco Alvarez to hit. It'd be nice. He has not. He has not done it at all over the last few months. Does he still call a hell of a game? Sure. Does he still pitch frame incredibly well? Absolutely. He doesn't throw guys out the way Luis Torrens does, but he does bring you positive attributes behind the plate. But a real positive attribute would be hitting the crap out of the baseball. Something we know he can do, and also something that he's been clutch at. You know, Alvarez, we went through this last year on a few Ricos, hit a lot of clutch home runs. The 3-run home run he hit that turned a 3-1 game into a 6-1 game, you can only hope opens up the floodgates for him. And the reason I have like a little bit of optimism that could be the case is that Alvarez has proven to be a very streaky hitter in his major league career. We certainly saw that in his rookie season last year, that Alvarez can sometimes be unbelievable for a month with great power and then disappear. Now, unfortunately for Francisco, it's been a couple of months of him not having much power. So hopefully over the final 16 games of the season, that home run that broke open a 3-1 game can be the hit that unlocks Francisco Alvarez, who's gotten a lot of playing time. You know, I wasn't sure last week when Torrens got that Monday start. It turned out that Mendy was just giving him a day, giving Alvarez the back-to-back off days to maybe recharge his batteries a little bit. He is, without a shadow of a doubt, the everyday catcher. So any doubt that was thrown in there, I guess it was a week and a half ago now, it's out the window. But that was a very significant home run, not just to break open a 3-1 game, but to maybe break open Francisco Alvarez. As far as the ninth was concerned, you know, Ryan Stanek was so dominant in game one of this series that I received a few emails. I'm not sure we're going to get to this email today, but did get an email, a couple of them saying, hey, Evan, are you ready to put Ryan Stanek in the circle of trust? I mean, think about what he did in the opener of this series. He comes into a 3-2 game. He comes in and strikes out the side against the heart of the Blue Jay order, and he's pumping in 99-mile-per-hour fastballs. Wow, he looked dominant. Except Stanek comes into this game, can't even get the 3 outs, keeps the Blue Jays alive to the point where it becomes a save situation for Edwin Diaz with the tying run on deck. And I don't think it's a big deal that he used Edwin Diaz. In fact, what I would even tell you is that once the Mets made it 6-1, I still would have gone with Edwin Diaz. I've made this point a lot recently with the 4-run leads, when to go to Edwin, when not to go to Edwin. Here's why I would have gone to him and not even messed around with Ryan Stanek. No offense to Stanek. He did pitch well, like I said, 2 days ago. You have an off day on Thursday. Diaz is a lot better when he works a lot. And yes, you have a 5-run lead, but if this reliever, in this case Stanek, puts a couple of guys on base, you're going to go to Alvarez anyway. So why mess around? That's always my thought. So this is not like a huge, horrible, what's Mendy thinking first guess. I'm just being consistent with how I view this. I do not think we need to be slaves to the closer role and say we only use a closer when it's a save situation. But Stanek gave us a little anxiety, and then Edwin Diaz made it very quick, very painless, and the New York Mets won a game they had to win. Did you think they were coming back off? Because I got to tell you, down 1-0, getting no hit by Bowden Francis, I was not exactly brimming with confidence that the Mets were going to be able to come back in this game.
Yeah, no, I was not very confident. I was saying to myself, you know what? Let them get no hit because this will get everything out of the way, and then next series the bats will blow up. I was wrong. They were close. They were getting no hit, and then I think the bats blew up, so it worked out.
I was thinking not necessarily that, boy, this will be the rock bottom to get the lineup going. I was thinking more on terms of, hey, in 2015, they got no hit twice. And 2015 was a pretty damn good year. They got to the World Series. They got no hit by Max Scherzer, which was the second to last day of the season. And they got no hit by Chris Heston of the San Francisco Giants. But they avoid the indignity of being no hit. And look, here's the reality of this, because there are 17 games left in this year. It is possible the Mets will be no hit before this season is through. It's also possible the Mets could get no hit in the playoffs, right? No hitters could happen. Let me say this before it ever happens. As embarrassing as it is, as much as it's frustrating, it only counts as one loss. So if they got no hit today versus they lost 1-0 and got 5 hit, what the hell's the difference? It really doesn't make a difference. But this team, to their credit, and this is where they do such a great job of trying to make us, and I can't speak for everybody, me maybe, Negative Dan, who's a big part of the podcast. This is where this Met team battles to win us over because they have shown a lot of guts this season. There's no denying that. I do not know how this season is going to end. It feels like it's an incredible roller coaster, and you're not exactly sure how it's going to end. Is it going to end with this team at least making the playoffs? Is it going to end with a first-round ouster? Is it going to end with a deep playoff run? Does it end with them not making the playoffs at all? I have no idea. We can sit here and try to predict it. I do not know. I'd be the first to tell you. But this team has continued to fight through adversity all season long. There's no denying that. They have responded to brutal losses all season long. And the other thing that they've done is they've responded to brutal performances in the midst of a game all season long. They've responded to, wow, the offense looks dead for 7 or 8 innings. And I cited this game earlier, and it's so early in the season that you almost forget it. But that game against the Tigers, and who would have known it at the time, sitting at 0-5 with 12 people at Citi Field, that's the kind of game that if the Mets do have the great success we're dreaming of, that's on the DVD. Because early on, it showed their fight. About to go 0-6, nobody in the building. Gary Cohn even said it on the broadcast. This feels like rock bottom or whatever he said. No one in the ballpark, getting no hit. Can it get any worse than this? And they fought back then. And that was just the first example of it. There's a lot of them throughout the season. They have responded to the bad loss and the bad performance. And where they also responded is not that they were just being no hit by Bowden Francis. Let's go deeper into this 3-game series against the Blue Jays. They didn't hit at all. They didn't. Go back to the first game of this series, the very first game. They are on the backs of Tyler McGill, pitching one of the great games of his entire career. 6 innings, 1 hit, probably could have gone deeper into the game, and they were trying to make 1 run. An RBI single by J.D. Martinez hold up by leading 1-0. They get the 6 straight innings out of Tyler McGill. They do nothing else offensively. Absolutely nothing else. And they weren't even threatening. It's not like they had a lot of opportunities. So they're getting shut down by not some big ace, but by Ryan Burr, who's an opener for 2 innings, And then they're shut down by Luis Frias and Ryan Yarbrough. So let's not forget how this all began. One run, they're trying to make a Tyler McGill shutout stand up. You knew that wasn't going to happen. They pulled Tyler McGill after 6 innings, which I sort of did have an issue with. Pitch counts 88. He had looked so dominant. He had retired 16 in a row. I push it a little bit if I'm Carlos Mendoza. And obviously, it's made to look worse that he goes to Danny Young. He faces the 3 batters. 2 of them gets on base. It looks worse that Jose Budo, who is starting to eliminate himself from the circle of trust, hits a batter with the bases loaded. Makes it look worse. Makes it look worse that the Mets instantly gave up the lead. But the offense, I can't even say the offense responded because, again, this is what made the explosion in Game 3 so impressive. They're now down 2-1. And I'll give them credit that Jesse Winker draws a walk, which he seems to do incredibly well. I'll give Francisco Alvarez credit for hitting that little roller for an infield single. And I'll certainly give Francisco Lindor credit for drawing a walk. But they scored their 2 runs on a wild pitch and a pass ball. That's how they rallied. So again, I give the Met offense credit in terms of the fact that they set up the rally, that Jesse Winker did draw a walk. There is some level of, hey, you had to work a good at-bat, and he did. And Francisco Alvarez had the swinging bunt hit, and Francisco Lindor drew a walk, which was nice to see. That's their rally that won them Game 1. That was their rally because they scored the tying run on a wild pitch and the winning run on a pass ball. Now, I wasn't complaining on Monday. If we had done a Rico on Monday, which was never going to happen, with the Jet game going on at the same time. Boy, I consumed that Monday game in a wild way. I'll get to that later if you care. But that's how they scored their 3 runs. Now, luckily, the pitching again bailed them out, which has really been the story of all this success. Ryan Stanek pitched that dominant inning. We talked about that earlier. Edwin Diaz gave us a heart attack in the 9th inning, and they were able to make the 1-run lead hold up, but it wasn't because the offense broke out. It was because they were fortunate. Their pitching was great. That part wasn't fortunate. That was earned. But their offense did nothing. And that's on the heels of their offense doing nothing against Cincinnati. And as they were racking up the wins, this is the battle I have sometimes. When the Mets are winning, a part of me wants to say, who cares about any negative around the win they won? Right? A win's a win. They all count the same. Whether you win 10-1 and it's impressive or you win 2-1 and it's ugly. It doesn't matter. But I can't do that because sometimes those negatives, while they may not affect you in an individual game, will come back and bite you in the ass. So when they win on Monday, the way I just described, it's great, but you're thinking to yourself, this can't continue. They've got to score runs. They've got to get big hits. They can't rely on a wild pitch and a pass ball. They were 1 for 6 on Monday night with runners in scoring position, and they backed it up because their pitching was good enough. Let me just get to Edwin Diaz real quick. So I don't know how many people who listen to the Rico are diehard football fans or diehard Jet fans. I'm sure some of you are. Some of you are Giant fans. Some of you don't like football. Some of you like an out-of-market team, like half the hosts on WFAN. I get that. This is Jets-Niners, Aaron Rodgers debut. So the way I did it is I watched the Met game as soon as it started. As soon as the Jet game started, I paused the Met game. And then during every timeout, there were so many of them, I would watch a half inning. I ended up finishing the game, I'd say early 3rd quarter, to where I knew the Jets were dead. Like the Jets were, this game was over. And so it was a little bit after it actually ended. I know, after speaking to Beningo, that it was at halftime. But when Edwin Diaz gave up that infield hit to Ernie Clement with 2 outs and nobody on a 1-run lead, and Leo Jimenez came up, I swear to you, I had a vision. It was not a good vision. It was a Kurt Suzukian vision, a Jacob Stolzian vision. You know, crap random players who have hit back-breaking, oh my God, I hit baseball home runs off of Edwin Diaz. Because who the hell is Leo Jimenez? I mean, who is he? Does anybody actually know? I love baseball, right? I love baseball. I play fantasy. I had no idea who he was. And so I had this vision, especially because of the way the Jet game was going, that Leo Jimenez was going to hit a random walk-off 2-run home run. And the worst thing about these visions is when you're like, oh my God, is this really happening? And off the bat, when Leo drove it to deep right field, I did utter a very loud, I don't know if I want to curse on the Rico. I know we have in the past, Pete, but, family audience. So I'm going to warn you. I'm going to tell you what I said. I'm not going to edit it out. Because, hey, I always want to be honest with you. Very loudly and clearly and distinctly, it scared my wife greatly. I uttered, fuck! Just like that. And as Marte was going back and back and back and back and back, I envisioned how awful this Monday was going to be. Not only are the Jets going to lose, they're going to lose this game. And as Marte stopped right in front of the wall, what an incredible feeling to see him make that catch and the Mets win the game. Ugly game. Ugly game. Offense, not impressive. But they won the game. And the relief I had was, great, they won. This is fantastic. I think Atlanta lost their makeup game that night to Cincinnati, so the Mets went up one game. But you can't win this way. Like, eventually, your starting pitching is going to get tripped up. Eventually, your bullpen is going to be even worse than what it was on that game on Monday. It's going to happen. Like, I love how good the starting pitching's been. We all do. It's tough to imagine it continuing. And guess what happened the next night? And I'm not going to rip David Peterson. David Peterson was due for this kind of performance. And he certainly wasn't helped out by his defense, but he kind of looked like the old David Peterson. I hate to say it. I'm not going to panic yet. I'm going to give him another opportunity. His next start is going to be, I guess it would be against the Nationals next week. I guess he wouldn't start in Philadelphia. I assume the Mets are going to keep their rotation intact, which means Tyler McGill will start the finale of that series. So it'd be Quintana, Severino, McGill. So Peterson will have a chance to redeem himself against Washington or against Philadelphia if they kept him on regular rest. I'm not sure if Mendy has announced that yet. But this was bound to happen. Like, even when you're established, you're going to have a bad start. And so the Met offense needed to pick itself up. They got the early run on the Brandon Nimmo bloop RBI single, which was great to see. He's behind in the count. Give David Peterson an early lead. He ran into trouble immediately. Actually made a big pitch in the first inning, getting Alejandro Kirk to ground into a 5-4-3 double play. And the second inning started with some bad defense by Mark Vientos, which sort of set the tone for the ugliness of the game. But you saw the lack of command. You saw David Peterson's kind of wildness. You saw he also make a bad defensive play on the bunt hit that started the third inning. You saw Kirk rip an RBI double. You saw Davis Schneider drive a bases clearing triple. And we saw kind of the worst of David Peterson. But as it was happening, I had two thoughts. Thought number one was, okay, can David Peterson at least fight and get this team through 5 innings? He wasn't able to do it. He did pitch that 1, 2, 3, 4th inning to keep it close. He got an out in the 5th inning. And at that point, that's when Mendy said, all right, I'm going to go to Huáscar Brazoban. And the Met bullpen, for the most part, kept them in the game for a while. The offense needed to step up. They needed Tuesday night to be the breakout game. They had a great opportunity early in this game when they had 2 on and nobody out. They only got the RBI single by Brandon Nimmo driving in a run. And after that, they had the failed opportunity in the 7th inning when Iglesias led off with a double. And they were set up with 2 on and 1 out. They had Vientos and Alonso coming up in a game that at the time was 5-2. Because guess how they got the run? You remember how they got the run? Make it 5-2. Pass ball. That's how the Mets score runs. They literally scored 3 consecutive runs, or 3 out of 4 runs, on wild pitches and pass balls. But you have Mark Vientos and you have Pete Alonso. And this is the one with Alonso that really drove me nuts. You're down 5-2. You got a runner on third and 2 outs. I am not asking for Pete Alonso to hit a 2-run home run. That'd be nice. Make it 5-4 in the 7th inning. You're in the game. I'm asking you, keep this rally going. And Pete had a great at-bat. He had an 11-pitch at-bat. Kept fouling balls off, which was awesome. And then he struck out looking. And while it was a good at-bat, and sure, I commend Pete Alonso. That was a good at-bat. It was an important at-bat to get this team back in the game, and he failed. And there's been a lot of that. And then the Mets did nothing the rest of the game. And so the Mets scored 2 runs in a game started by old friend Chris Bassett, who they made look great again, just like they did last year when his wife was in labor and he pitched anyway on a Friday night. So long-winded, because this was all about getting back to game 3. That's what the Met offense had done in this series. Everything I just described, which is nothing. Nothing. They did dick offensively in the first 2 games and 8 innings. They get an RBI single by J.D. Martinez. Great. 2 runs on a wild pitch and a pass ball. An RBI single by Brandon Nimmo. And another run on a pass ball. So the Mets have scored 5 runs in the first 26 innings of this series. And they came on 2 singles and then 3 either wild pitch or pass balls. See, when you think about it that way, just this series, not even including the ineptitude of the Cincinnati series, they have not been scoring runs. And then, like an explosion to win the finale of this series. Like a freaking explosion. Kudos to Tyler McGill, by the way. Tyler McGill on that Monday night wasn't supposed to start. It was supposed to be the return of Paul Blackburn. Paul Blackburn is dealing with this back issue. And apparently the back issue is enough where he's not coming back at all on this road trip. And at this point, I'm just not even thinking about it. I think we have to just kind of figure Tyler McGill's in the rotation. That's what we have to figure. He's in the rotation. And Paul Blackburn comes back, great. But I wouldn't expect it right now. I mean, it would be very tough to expect it right now. But that's okay, especially because Tyler McGill actually delivered in his last 2 starts, which is sort of stunning to think about. One knock on Mendy, and we'll read some of your emotional emails, the ricob@gmail.com. In game 2 of this series, he put together a lineup that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. This is now the part of the season. There's a phrase for it. This is nut cutting time. Okay, you're in a pennant race. The Mets are in a legitimate, tooth and nail, everyday matters pennant race to make the postseason. There is no fotzing around. I think we need to move past this guy needs a blow, this guy needs an off day, this guy needs a rest. I mean, you got to be past that. And I've respected that with guys like Starling Marte and J.D. Martinez because they're older players and you want to keep them healthy. But now, with off days, because the Mets do have off days, they're not playing some absurd schedule. They are off on Thursday, which is, if you're listening live or watching live, that's tomorrow. They play 3 games, and yes, they play a full week of baseball. But then they have an off day the following week. And then it's the final stretch of the season. To me, J.D. Martinez and Starling Marte, as long as you believe they are the best option to win a game, if that's what you believe. Now, maybe Marte isn't hitting a week and a half from now, and we're saying, you know what? Tyrone Taylor gives them the best chance to win. Unless that's the argument, they need to play. That's number 1. Number 2, you gotta, and look, he's a human being. I'm sure he's a wonderful guy. It's not personal. It's strictly business. They need to shoot DJ Stewart into space. Okay? He needs to go to Mars. Elon Musk, do us that favor. Bring DJ Stewart just away. Just Long Island Ducks, Mars. I don't care. He can't be there. Because DJ Stewart has now become like this drug for Carlos Mendoza to where he's got to use him every once in a while. I am sick of looking at him. I am sick of watching him. It has nothing to do with him reminding me or anyone else of Daniel Vogelback. It has to do with he's not good. He's not good. He doesn't give them the best opportunity to win. Does he have a good eye? Yeah, but it's not good enough. This isn't the DJ Stewart from last year that won me over, where I said a year ago at this time, he's earned a roster spot on next year's team. And he did. And I stand by the fact that he earned that. Well, now he's unearned it. Can't be on this team anymore. Can't be here. There was a suggestion that I received from Negative Dan, a contributor to the Rico B, who said, you know who's available? And this is an interesting one, because I think people would love this from a vibes standpoint. And I'm not sure if this has been out there, if this has been suggested by many people. So, Pete, you could tweet this out. Maybe get the Met fans all riled up and excited. And again, if anyone else has suggested this and I missed it, I apologize. But Negative Dan brought it up, and I did some research. And I was like, damn, he really is available, this guy. He's been DFA'd a few times. And he would bring the vibes to a very high level. And the guy he's referring to is Dom Smith. How about that? Now, is Dom Smith going to remind anybody of, Matt Franco in his prime coming off the bench? Not really. But would you rather watch Dom Smith get an at-bat, or would you rather watch DJ Stewart get an at-bat? Now, the real answer is neither. And they don't need to get at-bats. What Mendy did on Tuesday was, I need to get as many lefties in the order as possible against Chris Bassett. That was his thought. How'd that work out? Don't overthink it. Sometimes you just need to put your best players out there. Between Harrison Bader and Tyrone Taylor and certainly Jesse Winker and Starling Marte and Brandon Nimmo, they've got plenty of options. Those are the only guys that can be out there in the outfield for the rest of the season. With the infield, Eddie Alvarez is a pinch runner late, fine. I don't have a problem with that. But it's Alonso, Iglesias, Lindor, Vientos. That's it. We are now at the part of the season where you just got to play your best players. That's it. That's what you got to do. All right, let me read some of your emails. Giuseppe writes, I fell asleep, guys, and woke up to a pleasant surprise. Hey, Evan and Hoff, I'm in Toronto visiting this week. I went to the Monday night game and couldn't convince her, I guess his girlfriend or wife, to go to today's game, and we went to the Toronto Zoo instead. So I got back to the room to watch the game in the 7th inning, and I watched on my iPad until the bottom of the 8th and was very annoyed that they were being no-hit and fell asleep and woke up to my phone blown up and ESPN notifying me the Mets won. What's funny after the fact, my girlfriend says, we could have went to the game. I want to kill her. Well, you got to be honest in a relationship. So I don't want to turn this into relationship advice, but can I return that in relationship advice? One thing I've learned with my wife now is you just got to be honest. And what I appreciate about my wife is when I say, hey, honey, hey, we happen to be in Philadelphia. The Mets are playing the Phillies. Can we go to the game? There are times in which she'll say, yeah, that's fine. I got no problem with that, kind of like Giuseppe's girlfriend. But then there are times, and I respect it, when my wife says, no, we're not doing that. So I think what you got to do is just ask. Got nothing to lose. Jackson writes, best win of the season. For as terrific as the Mets have been playing since the calendar flipped to June, there really hasn't been that many miraculous how did they do that wins. Sure, the 9th inning walk-offs against the Marlins and Braves earlier this season were nice. The 9th inning comeback against Chapman and the Pirates was nice. And the big early innings comeback in Texas was nice. But nothing really comparable to the worst of the rip-your-heart-out losses the Mets have suffered this season. Like, for example, the Edwin Diaz Marlins game in May, which is still my choice for worst loss of the season. Even though today was only a one-run deficit, it felt different. Despite the recent hot streak, the offense really has not clicked, and that reached its low point today. I never do this, but a part of me started spite hoping they'd get no hit and the embarrassment would finally wake them up. It's kind of like what Hoff said earlier, that they could benefit from being no hit, which I don't know if I buy. Well, I'm glad my intrusive thoughts didn't win, because this was the best win of the season, even more so than the London game against the Phillies and Marte throwing 2 men out at the plate, Lindor walk-off against the Cubs earlier in the season, my other top choices. It felt more like a 3 or 4 run comeback given the circumstances, and must feel great for this team going into an off day and a huge series against the Phillies. We can only hope that this is finally the offense turning the corner. Here's to the best win of the season. It's the best win of the season because the later you get, even though they all count the same, the bigger it feels. We didn't know at the time of this game that the Atlanta Braves would lose to the Washington Nationals. We didn't know that. If we knew that, it'd be like, oh, yeah, we'll still be tied. Sucks to lose this series. We're still tied. We didn't know that. Braves could have won. They should have won. They had Max Fried on the mound against the Washington Nationals. They lost. Their offense did nothing. Fried didn't pitch well. Not my problem. Actually, the opposite of not my problem. Very enjoyable. And the Braves continue to be ravaged by injuries. That's not my problem. Let me make that very clear. That's none of our problems. So I think the later you get in a season, especially any kind of comeback you make late, the bigger it feels. And I think for Lindor to be the guy, he's been the guy so consistently now down the stretch. He's making every case to win the MVP, as much as I don't necessarily care about that right now in the middle of September. But he is carrying this team on a high level. Let's hear from Negative Dan, my man. By the way, Hoff has activated a live chat while we do the show on YouTube. And the first one I saw was Evan looking so well lit today. Now, is he talking about me looking lit like I'm high, or the view of us on YouTube is well lit? Which one is it?
I think this is about the quality of your video, and your facial features just seem to be brighter today. I don't know why. Why would that be the case?
I'll be perfectly honest. I will tell you why I am more well lit today. The company, I give the company a lot of credit. The company believes in the Rico, believe it or not. And the company believes in you, anyone who downloads and listens, and decided, you know what? We're going to spend some money on the Rico. And I heard that a couple of weeks ago, and I said, great. So we're just going to take the money? And they're like, no. We're not just going to give you the money. We're going to make things a little bit better. You know, maybe your camera will look better. Maybe we'll give you some lighting. And me and Hoff are like, sure. Like, okay, no big deal. So this is our first Rico Brogna. If it's the audio version, it's all the same. If it's the video version on YouTube, we have a better looking camera and some lighting. that is true. Yeah. So whoever wrote that, you're right. You've noticed something that's true.
Yeah, I'm trying to catch up. I have my camera, I have my light up, but I don't know what to do with the camera yet. So my face isn't as perfect as yours.
All you have to do is plug it in.
Yeah, that didn't work yet. We'll work after this. By the way, I do want to say that the live chat was an accident. I accidentally pressed the button, and now I know it worked. So we're gonna do that going forward.
Yeah, live chats are fine. I got no problem with it. I mean, it's great. Let people interact, especially when we're all in a good mood. When things are bad, it's going to be an ugly chat. Now, basically, because I think what happens, and I do this sometimes too as a fan, is you start to blame everybody else when the team loses. Like I've said this on the air with Tommy Lugauer, Positive Tommy. I said to Positive Tommy, if the Mets win, I love you. Like you're my guy. But if the Mets lose, I blame you. And I blame your fake positivity. I blame all of that. Your shtick will be why the Mets lose. Now, that's irrational, obviously. But I think that's what happens. So if the Mets start losing, and they probably will at some point, and things start to go really badly, like let's say we collapse, oh, that chat's going to just be vile. It's just going to be Evan's a douche. This is Sal Licata's fault. Pete Hoffman's fault. And it'll be ugly. Anyhow, Negative Dan writes, if this team is different, then you better finish the job. All these incredible wins, especially today, are great and have everybody getting roped right back in like always. But like you, Evan, said on air today, it will be remembered as a wet fart in the wind if after putting themselves in position to get to October, they don't finish their story. I'm mainly referencing the core right now, who have the opportunity to rectify the dog crap they gave us 2 years ago. If they can somehow drag this team, who everyone, especially me, said had no business being in the playoffs, to even a wild card round, they will have earned everyone's respect as a group that can get themselves over the finish line, which this year is just getting in, and the right to stay together going forward. But if you are in the position they're in now, and especially it comes down to the Atlanta series, and they piss down their legs again, then that becomes twice this has happened, and 3 out of 4 years of not even making the postseason. At that point, it's an aberration. It will be at that point, it isn't an aberration. It will be who they are, and I don't see any way you can justify keeping them together and running it back just to keep banging your head against the wall. So Here's what I will tell you. The Mets are a game up. There are 17 games to go in the season, or 16 games to go in the season. I keep screwing up the amount of games. I think it's 16 games to go in the season. Let's play the game together right now because I know their schedule. 3 games against Philadelphia, 3 games against Washington, 4 against Philadelphia. That gets to 10. And then 3 Atlanta, 3 Milwaukee. Okay, 16 games to go in the 2024 Major League Baseball season. Same for Atlanta. Arizona, San Diego, they are absolute factors, especially when you look at the Padres schedule and especially when you look at the fact that they play each other to end the season. So I am not ignoring the existence of the Mets and Braves both making the postseason. That absolutely can happen. With 16 games to go and a 1-game lead on the Atlanta Braves and 3 games head-to-head with Atlanta, I absolutely think that there is no excuse to not making the postseason. There will be no spin, at least here, on them not making the postseason. I get that the win total number for a playoff spot feels a lot higher than maybe we thought at the beginning of the season, or certainly what we thought back in the middle of May when it felt like just getting to 500 would be enough. So, yeah, that bar has changed. But if they don't make the postseason, I don't want to make declarations of what they should do in the offseason or who shouldn't be here because that's ignoring how they missed the playoffs. I mean, right now they're in the driver's seat. They're a game up. Tell me how many games they lose. Tell me if it is peeing down their leg against the Atlanta Braves. Tell me who hits. Tell me who doesn't hit. Tell me how it actually happens. So I can't tell you the declaration of what I would do or what they wouldn't do. But I will say this. They got to make the playoffs. I'm not going to celebrate this. We're not doing post-Rico 2024s celebrating. And if they don't make the playoffs, because I think I heard somebody say it on the fan. I'm trying to remember who it is. It wasn't me, obviously, referencing what I've said, saying, well, what are you going to do? Fire David Stearns? No. It's not about what we're going to do. What I'm going to do is bitch about it. That's what I'm going to do. Like, obviously, I'm not saying if the Mets don't make the playoffs, I'm going to fire the manager or I'm going to fire the general manager. I'm going to merely say this was a disappointment. That doesn't mean there has to be a repercussion to it. Obviously, Negative Dan's repercussion is he probably doesn't bring back Pete Alonso. He probably looks to trade Brandon Nimmo or whatever other kind of breaking up the core decision he'd want to make. I'm not saying I would do that. Let me see how the season ends, but I'll be very disappointed. I think we should all be that way. The bar has been set. They are a game up. That Atlanta series is going to matter. It's all going to be right in front of them to beat a team that's ravaged by injuries, a team that's not very good. Go beat them. Go beat them and kind of rectify the indignity of what happened a couple of years ago. Andrew writes, hi, Evan. Francisco Lindor is the most valuable player in the National League. If Ohtani wins the award, a terrible precedent is set, and it will be impossible to not give him an award in a season that he also pitches. He could hit .230 with a 4 ERA and win MVP because he does both. If he gets it this year, he almost has to get it the rest of his career. Francisco Lindor is the MVP. Do you think the voters could have a similar thought process? I think if the Mets end up making the playoffs, there's a really good chance Lindor is going to win the award. I do. I think that you will see voters kind of change their mind on it. John writes, Mets Jays. John was actually at the game, this guy, and he was writing from the game, not happy about what was going on. In fact, I'll read you that first email. Hey, I've been fairly new to the podcast, been listening for a few months, a fan, listening to your shows for the better part of 5 years. Thank you very much. I'm 39 years old, live in Toronto. I'm a diehard Blue Jays fan, but has also been a fan of the Mets for about 25 years as well. I'm currently on the train to the Rogers Center for my 13th game this season, but it will be the first time I'm seeing the Mets ever, as every other time they came to Toronto, I haven't been able to get down there and see them. How about that? In all your years going to games, are there any teams you haven't seen live yet, or other teams you're looking forward to seeing every year? In 2 years, when the Mets come back to Toronto, if you want to make the trip, I'll treat you. Well, thank you very much, John. I have never been, believe it or not, because it's relatively close. I've never been to a Blue Jays game at Sky Dome. I've been to the Sky Dome, like I passed by it when I was up there in Toronto for a Nets-Raptors playoff game. I've actually never been to a game at Sky Dome or Rogers Center now. I've been to about 22 of the 30 active ballparks, and Toronto's actually one of them. I have seen every team play live. Every team play live. And I think a part of that is because I go to like every freaking Met game, or at least I used to back in the day. I still go to a lot, but I used to go to every freaking Met game. And I think with interleague play, I've been able to get to all of them. John's follow-up was 18 days ago, I was in the building for Bowden Francis pitching a no-hitter into the ninth inning, and he gave up a leadoff home run. Did that actually happen? I didn't realize that. Maybe they said that on the broadcast, but being on the air live, I never get to hear that he actually took a no-hitter into the ninth inning and gave up a home run just like he did in this game. Today, I experienced deja vu, and I almost felt like it was going to happen. Sitting there 15 rows from the field, I heard people in my section, both Mets and Jays fans, talking about the no-hitter. Not that I'm superstitious, but I'm a little stitious. So even though I know what I do doesn't affect the game, I'm not going to do anything that could possibly jinx the team, just in case I started getting frustrated with so many people talking about it. Now, when it comes to the ninth inning, once Lindor hit that home run and Chad Green was coming in, I felt the reality is the Blue Jay bullpen will do what they did Monday night and knew right then and there the Mets were going to win the game. The bullpen has been so brutal all season long, as many bullpens have been. They've blown so many games, you know it's going to happen. Well, I didn't, it's funny. When Lindor hit the home run, I didn't have the confidence yet because the Met offense had been so quiet. My confidence started to build once they had bases loaded, nobody out, because my thought, Hoff, was they can't possibly F this up. I mean, they could, but by accident, they'll score a run, or the Blue Jays will do what they did 3 other times in this series and allow a run to score on a wild pitch or a pass ball. That's what gave me the confidence.
Well, all I kept on hearing from, because I was listening to the game, was from Keith Redd and McCarthy, was that they just got to get Francis out of the game, because as soon as they get to the bullpen, forget about it. It should be they can, and they've shown they can hit them. And just to confirm, it's second time in 3 weeks that Francis has had a no-hitter go to the ninth inning. Tyler Ward of the Angels hit a home run, a leadoff home run.
You know what? Now that you say that, I kind of vaguely remember that from a few weeks ago.
Yep.
That's incredible. That really is incredible. I've kind of been, I think the no-hitter, even the one that's pitched by a singular pitcher, which Bowden Francis tried to do and certainly had a chance to do a few weeks ago, like you talked about, it doesn't mean as much to me as it used to. I used to find the no-hitter to be so incredibly special. I want to score it. I want to see it. Oh, my God, if it's going on right now, let me flip to go watch it. And for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe it's because batting averages are way down. Maybe it's because I've seen so many now, not even live, just in general, that it doesn't necessarily stick as much. Couple of things. Do you feel that way, by the way, before we move on?
I don't actually. I feel differently, because I feel like the combined no-hitter to me is nothing. The perfect game maybe is what it is. Like, if it's a perfect game, I'm locked in.
That's different.
This wasn't a perfect game, but still, maybe it's because we've seen like the Edwin Jackson no-hitters where he walks 8 people, and that just doesn't feel the same. So I do feel that part of it.
So here's the situation as the Mets take an off day on Thursday. The situation is pretty simple. They're a game up on the Atlanta Braves. They're about to play 7 of 10 against the Philadelphia Phillies. Look, I'm all for fantasizing. I'm all for dreaming big. And there's no doubt the Mets owe the Philadelphia Phillies and their franchise and their fans for our tortured history with them, specifically back in 2007. The Phillies won on Wednesday night, so they are going to go into that 3-game series with an 8-game lead in the National League East, an 8-game lead with 16 to go. If the Mets win every single game against the Philadelphia Phillies, no margin for error, 7 for 7 against the Philadelphia Phillies, that would leave the Mets a game behind the Phillies. If they won 6 out of 7, which would be an incredible accomplishment, they would be 3 games behind the Philadelphia Phillies and would need to make up the ground elsewhere. Winning the National League East is not realistic. I thought, and I think I remember saying this on the Rico maybe a month ago, that they needed to be within 5 going into this series, that was the magic number. If you're within 5 and you've got 7 of 10 against them and you can win 5 out of 7, that's enough for this thing to be legitimate. So This series is strictly, not that it matters. You're trying to win either way, but at least for us going into this, this is not about the NL East. The Mets are not winning the NL East. And to quote a wise man, to quote a man that Pete knows very, very well, I would say, and I'm quoting him when I say this, the NL East is over. That we do know. You like that? No?
I love it. It's not over. Never say it's over. We've seen the 7-17. I'm down for a 7-16. Is that where we're at right now? 7-16?
It's 8-16, and it would take literally winning every game against the Philadelphia Phillies, and then the 6 remaining games that they play against Washington, or 9 remaining games that they play, they'd have to go like 7-2. So they probably have to go 14-2 in the next 16 games, with 14 of them being against Philadelphia, or 7 of them being against Philadelphia. I was thinking with 16 games to go and the Mets sitting at 80-66, is going 10-6, which is realistic, going 10-6. That would get you to 90-72. Is that the number that gets the Mets into the postseason? Is 10-6. And look, the 3 games against Atlanta, how you do against them certainly matters a little bit. But is 10-6 that sweet spot that gets this team a playoff spot?
I don't think they need to get 90 wins. I still
Really?
think it should be a little less than that. I do. We said the 86 number. I think that's unrealistic. I think it's a little bit higher. I think like 88 is going to get there, because I still think that the Braves are just going to fall off. And I think the Padres and the Diamondbacks, I think one of them are going to fall as well. They're going to beat each other up at the end. There's a possibility of a sweep that creates a lot of havoc for everybody.
Yeah, and it creates the fantasy of getting the first wild card spot. I mean, it's still potentially in play. So on Thursday, the Mets are obviously off. We're going to give you a Rico Brogna. We're going to go into best offensive seasons in Met history. We will finally give you that breakdown. I will include Lindor because obviously that's what provoked it, David Stearns' comments. But we'll go through some of the great offensive seasons in Met history, some of which I think have been forgotten about. And we will determine fairly the best offensive season in the history of the New York Mets. Let me rephrase that. The best season from a position player in Mets history. Because when I say offense, that means we're excluding defense, and that's not fair. A part of why Lindor is an MVP candidate is his defense. It's a big part of it. So the best all-around position player season from a New York Met. We'll go deep into that during the Met off day, Rico Brogna. But just to set this up, 3 games against the Philadelphia Phillies. We know Quintana and Aaron Nola on Friday night. We know Luis Severino late Saturday afternoon. It will either be David Peterson coming back on regular rest to pitch Sunday against Philadelphia, or Tyler McGill with an extra day of rest pitching against Philadelphia on Sunday. I think I would go with Peterson. I think I would. As well as McGill pitched in his last start, David Peterson has been one of the Mets' best starting pitchers. Him and Sean Manaea, take your pick. And I want him against the top competition because it gives you the best chance to win. Similarly to what they did a few weeks ago when they used him on regular rest so that he could face the Arizona Diamondbacks. And guess what he did? He performed at a high level. So that's what I would do. Either way, you would get David Peterson facing the Philadelphia Phillies in that series at Citi Field. Now, if you pitch him on Sunday, that means he would come back and pitch. Let me do the math here. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The Friday game against Philadelphia, which would set him up for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in Atlanta. So that would allow David Peterson's next 3 starts, if you push him to regular rest, to be Phillies, Braves. As opposed to, I'm going to do the math as best I can. As opposed to it being Nationals, Phillies, Braves. He could still face the Atlanta Braves in that 3-game series in Atlanta, and that's what you want. I mean, right now, if you had to pick your 3 starting pitchers to face the Atlanta Braves, I think it's obvious what it would be, and that would be, in any order, Manaea, Severino, and Peterson. That'd be the preference. We'll see how the Mets work the rotation to finagle that coming up. As far as the competition, because it's not just about the Mets, it's about how everyone else does too, as part of this pennant race. On Thursday, no one plays. So it's a good chance to just kind of relax, watch some football, check out the American League. But coming up this weekend, the Atlanta Braves are hosting the LA Dodgers. So that's nice. Maybe the Dodgers can help the Mets out. The Diamondbacks are hosting the Milwaukee Brewers, a team who's had a wonderful season. And the Padres are in San Francisco against the Giants. And I think that includes facing Logan Webb. So the Mets are at least going to potentially get some help from some quality opponents that are facing the other teams in the wild card race. So another Rico Brogna on Thursday. We'll go heavy onto the best all-around season from a position player, and we'll go more detailed into your emails. I'll go through a lot more of them, and we'll read some of your thoughtful emails and maybe the live chat on YouTube that Pete somehow figured out. The email is thericob@gmail.com. We'll also play a voicemail or two, so any questions or comments going into the final 16 games, you can leave us a voicemail. The number to call is, what's the number to call again, Pete?
725-222 8669
8699. Even though I know that part. Anyhow, we do appreciate you downloading and subscribing to Rico Brogna or watching on YouTube. Thank you very much. We'll give you another Rico, like I said, on Thursday. We'll definitely give you a Rico Brogna wrapping up the 3-game series against the Phillies. And I feel pretty confident with Pete's kind of like, I'll do a Rico anytime. And my craziness, that will probably give you Ricos throughout the weekend as well as they play this big series against the Philadelphia Phillies. Thank you very much for listening and subscribing to another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.